And it sounds to me like Scranton is ready for a political revolution. Peter Sanders, Ellie Sulam, and Mayor Milgren for their kind introductions, and thank all of you for being here today. When we began this campaign, almost a year ago from today, we were considered to be a fringe candidacy. That's right. We have come a long way in the last 11 months. We have won some 18 caucuses and primaries. When we began this race and did national polling, Secretary Clinton was 65 points ahead of us. In the last couple of weeks, there were a couple of polls that had us ahead of her. When you look at the general election matchup between Donald Trump and other Republicans against Clinton or myself, we end up almost always doing better against Trump than us. The last CNN national poll had us 20 points ahead. And the reason I think that our campaign is doing as well as it is that we are doing something extremely radical in American politics. We are telling the truth. Number one, and number two, we are treating the American people with respect and intelligence. There are some very, very serious problems in this country, and I think you all know that. But the most serious of all of the serious problems is we don't honestly discuss the serious problems that we have. And watch the Senate or the House in action day after day after day. Many of the most important issues do not get talked about. You can watch television till the cows come home, and they will talk about everything in this world except the most important issues facing working families. What the American people are saying is, first of all, we need to talk about the real issues and we need to come up with solutions to the real problems. And the reason that the real issues are not largely talked about is that at the end of the day, if we are going to address those issues, we are going to have to take on some very powerful special interests. Stand before you and honestly tell you, look, we can deal with the decline of the American middle class, 35-year decline of the American middle class, grotesque levels of income and wealth inequality, the fact that we have 47 million people living in poverty, the fact that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, the fact that we are not aggressively enough dealing with climate change, all of these other issues. Well, we can do it by tinkering around the edges here. But I have to tell you the truth. That is not the case. At the end of the day, no president of the United States, and I'm the only candidate who will tell you this, no president can solve or address effectively the real problems facing the middle class and working families of this country, the elderly, the children, the poor, unless we have a political revolution. What I mean by that, and again, nobody who's running for president will tell you this, but it's the truth, is that Wall Street and corporate America and the corporate media and the wealthy campaign contributors have so much power that no president, not the best intention in the world, can deal with these issues alone. Essentially, what we need to make the transformations that our country now requires are millions of people standing up, being involved in the political process in a way that we have not seen in the recent history of this country. People who have given up. We got a lot of people who don't even vote anymore. They say, I look at what's going on in Washington, forget about it, I don't want to vote, I don't want to participate in this charade. You have young people who have never voted in their whole lives. Those people, middle class, working people, young people, have got to get engaged in the political process in a way that we have not seen, and demand. What they should be demanding is that we have a government that represents all of us, not just a handful of wealthy people. Here in Pennsylvania and all over this country. It's not just electing the president, that's important. It is mobilizing our people to exercise their democratic rights, to understand that in a democracy, if we as citizens choose to utilize the power that we have, we can make profound changes. But if we sit back and we look at democracy as a spectator sport, if we moan and we groan, oh, this stinks, this is terrible, but of course I'm not getting involved in the political process. If that continues, the rich will continue to get richer, and everybody else will get poorer. So what this campaign is about is urging people to stand up. I'm the former chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and in that capacity, I've talked to some extraordinary people who have put their lives on the line to defend American democracy. We have an obligation to those who put their lives on the line and those who never came back to say, you know what, yeah, democracy is a beautiful idea. And what it means is a handful of people will not make the decisions for the future of this country. All of us will. So what are some of the issues that we have to put on the table that other people do not talk about? You're never going to see discussed on television. And we've got to look at media as well, as being part of the establishment, to a large degree part of the problem. We as Americans have got to go into our own hearts and say, these are the issues. It's not just what you see on the 6 o'clock news. Now, what are the issues? Number one, we're going to get to those. Number one, we need a vibrant democracy. We need more than me. Democracy, what does that mean? Right now, in fact, I'm the only candidate who will tell you this straight up. You have a corrupt campaign finance system which allows Wall Street and billionaires to buy elections. All of the people in our country have to ask themselves a very simple question. Democracy is not a complicated process. What it means is one person, one vote. What is happening in America today when you have a handful of billionaires and Wall Street and big money interests contributing hundreds of millions of dollars to the candidates of their choice, candidates who will invariably represent the wealthy and the powerful? Is that really what American democracy is supposed to be about? And that is why together we're going to overturn this disastrous Citizens United. about Republican governors all over this country suppressing the vote, making it harder for the elderly, for the young people, for people of color to participate in the political process. I want this country to have one of the highest voting turnout rates of any major country on earth, not one of the lowest voter turnout rates. That means that we pass policies that make it easier for people to participate, not harder. But it is not only a corrupt campaign finance system, it's not only Republican suppression of the vote. We just had a Democratic primary in New York State the other day. I share those sentiments, but here's the point. I don't mind losing, but 3 million people in New York State, 3 million people who registered as independents did not have the right to participate in the vote. That really is not democracy. So what we need to do is create a vibrant democracy, and that means one person, one vote, overturning Citizens United, and making sure that anybody in America 18 years of age or older has the right to vote. End of discussion. A corrupt campaign finance system and attacks on our democratic rights that you're making. We have a rigged economy in which the middle class for 35 years has been in decline, in which people today are working longer hours for lower wages, in which millions of decent paying jobs have been lost in this country as corporations shut down here and move to Mexico or China. A rigged economy in which people are trying to survive on $8, $9, $10 an hour, but they cannot do that. So one of the tasks in front of us, and one of the goals of the Sanders administration, is to create an economy that works for all of us, not just for one. Now, what is going on in the economy? And again, what I'm going to tell you is stuff that is not often on TV, it's not often in the newspapers. And that is, right now, we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth. It is worse today than since 1928. What does that mean? Now listen to this. Top 1/10 of 1% today, top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Today, the wealthiest 20 people in this country, that's this front row right up here, own more wealth. I don't think it's these guys. They own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans, half of our population. 20 people. All right, let me show you how a rigged economy works in the real world. It is not only the massive levels of wealth inequality, it is that the wealthiest family in this country, which is, that's right, it is the Walton family of Walmart. And now listen to this, they own, one family, more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. That's bad enough. But what is even worse is they who own Walmart pay their employees wages that are so low that many of those employees are forced to go on food stamps and Medicaid because they can't make it on their wages. Who pays for the food stamp and Medicaid that Walmart employees do? a rigged economy? A rigged economy is when a declining middle class subsidizes the wages of the wealthiest family in America because they refuse to pay their workers adequate wages. That's a rigged. So I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, pay rent. Now, what this campaign is about is really something fairly radical in the sense that it is asking the American people to think outside of the box, outside of the status quo. All right, because what goes on every day through media, through most politicians, we will give you choices between A and B. For example, right now, bill on the floor of the Senate on veterans issues. The issue is, do we cut housing allowances for veterans in order to provide other benefits for veterans? Those are the choices. Cut here to subsidize that. Do we cut people from health insurance to do something else? Those are the choices that we are given. Those are false choices. Here are the choices that we should be looking at. If we were a poor country, let's just say, we're a poor country. And somebody said, well, wouldn't it be nice if we really had a great education system? And somebody said, yeah, it would be, but you know what? We're a poor country. We can't afford to train teachers. We can't afford to pay teachers a living wage. We can't afford to have health care for all people and have the doctors and the dentists and the psychologists that we need because we're poor. Now, poor countries have to deal with that reality. Guess what? We are not a poor country. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Problem is, and again, we don't discuss this, in the last 35 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth in this country. Unfortunately, that transfer has gone in the wrong direction. It has gone from the middle class and working families to the top 0.1% that now have a doubling of the percentage of wealth that they did 30 years ago. So when we talk about the needs of America, the truth of the matter is we can address those needs if we have the courage to stand up to the people who have the wealth and the power. Let's just start off. Every psychologist, we got any psychologists in this room today? All right, there's one. Every psychologist who studies the issue will tell you that the age from 0 to 4 are the most important years of intellectual and emotional development for a human being, right? 0 to 4. How do we treat the children of this country? 0 to 4. Think about it for a moment. Number one, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. 20% of our kids living in poverty. African American kids, 35% living in poverty. Issue number two, given the state of the economy today, most families need mom out working, dad out working. Is that right? Yeah. All right. Now, if mom's working and dad's working, you got 1 or 2 kids or more, who's going to take care of the kids? Are they going to get the quality child care, pre-K education they need? The answer is, in my state of Vermont and in most areas around this country, they do not get it. Here is the reality. Many child care providers do not have the training, do not have the education, are not earning the salaries they need to provide the quality care that are looking for. That we would have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country, and that we would have a totally inadequate child care system. This is the United States of America, and you tell me why we cannot have the best pre-K system in the world. All right, kids leave pre-K, leave childcare, and they go to public. Most of them go to public schools. And yet, if you look all over this country, you're finding many public school systems in deep trouble. You're finding kids not getting the quality education they need. You're finding in state after state attacks on public education and a movement to privatize public education, which I believe is a disaster. Who made that determination? Who said that in this country, with all of the bright young people we have who should be getting into teaching, you should understand that teaching is a noble and wonderful profession. Why don't we have the best public education system in the world? We got to think about that. It has to do with our national priorities. Apparently, for many in Congress, it is more important to give hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 1% than it is to invest in our schools. Right now in this country, our kids are in high school right now, they're thinking about going to college. All over this country, you talk to kids, and they say, well, I'd love to go to college, but you know what? I don't know that I can afford to go to college. And B, I am really worried that if I do go to college, I will graduate college $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt. Right? Think about that for a second. Take a deep breath. This is the United States of America. Why are we punishing our young people for getting the education? What common sense would suggest, if we're concerned about the quality of life of our own people, we're concerned about the future of our economy, what common sense would suggest, we want all of our people, not just the young, by the way, to be able to get all of the education they need to improve their lives and their work opportunities. Unradical it is. If you go to Germany today, you go to Scandinavia, you go to other countries, what they do is invest in their students and they provide college education virtually free. I think that that is a good idea. 50 years ago in the United States, if you were able to get a high school degree, truth is you're doing pretty well, and the likelihood is you could go out and get a decent paying middle class job. To a significant degree, because of changes in the economy, changes in technology, people today need more education than they received 50 years ago. That's just a fact. So to my mind, when we talk about public education today, it is not good enough to talk about first grade through 12th grade. We have got to say that public colleges and universities should be tuition free. At the same time, we've got to realize there are millions of people today being crushed with very high levels of student debt. My city a couple of years ago talked to a young woman, her dream was to become a doctor. She did, $300,000 in debt. Talked to a young woman in Iowa, she wanted to be a dentist. We desperately need dentists. $400,000 in debt. Talked to a guy in Nevada. He's been paying off his student debt for 25 years, more in debt today than he was when he took out that debt. Talk to another kid, 2 years of college, $60,000 in debt, dropped out of school. These are stories and realities taking place all over this country. My friends, that is nuts. Once again, if we deal with this reality, if we say, why is it that because people get what human beings should desire and receive, that is all the education they need, why are we punishing them? Well, then people, critics of mine, will say, well, Bernie, you're like Santa Claus, you want to give out free tuition in public colleges and universities, you want to lower student debt, how are you going to pay for it? That's the point. All right. That's a good point. But here is also the point, not only for war. 9 years ago, after the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior of Wall Street drove this country into the worst economic downturn in the modern history of this country since the 1930s. What did Congress do? They bailed them out. Okay, I didn't vote for that, but that's what Congress did. So you want to hear something really radical? Illegal behavior on Wall Street by CEOs who are, in some cases, billionaires. Congress bails them out. Okay, I'll give you a less radical idea of what we should do today. If we want to make public colleges and universities tuition free, if we want to substantially lower student debt, we impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. That will raise more than enough money to provide public colleges and universities tuition free and lower student debt. But this is not an idea that the establishment feels all that comfortable. They like the idea of bailing out Wall Street, that's okay. But bailing out the middle class and helping working families, that is a terribly radical idea. I don't think so. And not the needs of ordinary Americans. But we have tried to listen to ordinary Americans. This is what we're hearing. We are hearing from working people who are at work right now. They're at McDonald's, they're at Burger King, they're working in the fast food industry, they're working in small and medium-sized businesses, large corporations. They can't make it on $8, $9, $10 an hour. And you can do the arithmetic as well as I can. You got to pay rent or a mortgage. You got to put gas in the car. You got to get insurance for your car. You got to get some health insurance. Most of us have to buy food. You add it all together, making $300-400 a week does not pay for those basic needs. Not a living wage. That's right. So what we need to do as a nation, in fact, is pass a living wage, $15 an hour. A week should not be living in poverty. That's not never discussed on television, almost never at all. but of enormous consequence and a real difference of opinion between Secretary Clinton and myself. One of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons that the middle class in America has been in decline for 35 years is that we have lost tens of thousands of factories and manufacturing plants because of disastrous trade policies. We have lost plants in Pennsylvania. 2001, Thomson Consumer Electronics shut down its television manufacturing plant in Dunmore, throwing over 1,000 workers out on the street, and moved to Mexicali, where they paid workers in Mexico $4.40 an hour in wages and benefits. 2007, McKinney Products stopped making hinges in Scranton and moved its manufacturing plant to China, costing 190 good-paying jobs. 2006, Paper Magic Group shut down its greeting card manufacturing plant in Scranton, moved to China, 315 jobs gone. Last year, Allegheny Technology shut down 2 steel plants in western Pennsylvania. 600 workers lost their jobs due to a surge in cheap imports from China. 2009, Hershey shut down its York peppermint patties plant in Reading, moved to Mexico, 300 jobs, and on and on and on it goes. All right, so what do we have to do? What we have got to do, and you are listening to somebody who has voted and fought against every one of these disasters. From day one that these trade policies were written by corporate America. And what was their goal? It's not hard to understand that if you were a large, greedy corporation, you want to pay a worker in Pennsylvania a living wage, provide health benefits, and protect environmental rules. Of course you don't. You'll shut down here, you move to Mexico, you move to China, pay people a fraction of the wages, you don't have to deal with the union, you don't have to deal with the environment, and you bring your products back here. That was the goal of these trade agreements, and that is exactly what has happened. I opposed all of these trade agreements. Secretary Clinton supported virtually all of them. That is a major difference. Not only raising the minimum wage to a living wage, not only radically changing our trade policies, it is also understanding that in our great country, we used to have the best infrastructure of any country on earth. We were number one. That means our roads, it means our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our rail, our levees, our dams, our schools, our housing stock. Right? That used to be the case. I was a mayor for 8 years and I learned a very simple lesson. If you don't invest in your infrastructure, it does not get better all by itself. It gets worse. So we have now the opportunity with a crumbling infrastructure. My state, our bridges, massive disrepair. Flint, Michigan is not the only city in America with an inadequate, failing water system. So let me suggest to you a concept which is not all that radical, and that is people should not be forced to drink polluted or toxic water in America. By the way, is why I am opposed to fracking. difference between Secretary Clinton and myself. But what we have got to do as a nation is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Again, it is not a radical idea to say that we should not have bridges that are falling apart, that our roads should be in decent shape, that we should not have, I was in New York City last week, you can't move in the streets of New York City, incredible traffic congestion. We can do better than that. That means investing $1 trillion in our infrastructure, creating 13 million decent jobs. A great nation is not judged by the number of millionaires and billionaires that it has, or by the number of nuclear weapons that it has, or the number of wars that it gets into. A great nation is judged morally by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable. I mentioned the issue of children before, who are the weakest and most vulnerable, who cannot stand on their own 2 feet, but also let's look at how we treat senior citizens and veterans in this country. Again, this is an issue that is not talked about very often. And the reasons why that, but let's talk about it right here in Pennsylvania, in my state, and around this country. You got millions of senior citizens and disabled veterans and people with disabilities trying to make it on $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. Think about it for a second. Again, just do the arithmetic. Pay for your mortgage, pay for your rent, pay for your heating, pay for your food, pay for your medicine. You know what? You can't make it on $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a year. And that is why I strongly disagree with Republicans who actually want to cut Social Security benefits. And that is really quite incredible. And I happen to believe that not only will we not cut Social Security benefits, we are going to expand Social Security. Very simply, right now, we have a Social Security tax system in which somebody who makes $5 million a year contributes the same amount into the Social Security Trust Fund as somebody who makes $118,000. You lift that cap starting at $250,000 and above, so that somebody who makes $1 million a year contributes the same percentage of his income into Social Security as somebody making $50,000. What they're able to do. Benefits by $1,300 a year for people making less than $16,000 and extend Social Security for 58 years. Now I have, in campaign, I've introduced legislation to do this. I've asked Secretary Clinton to come on board this legislation. I hope that she will. As of today, she has not. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. And what they are asking is, how can we spend trillions of dollars on a war in Iraq that we never should have gotten into? There is another difference between the Secretary Mary and myself. I voted against that war. She voted for that war. But we have trillions of dollars for wars that we should not have gotten into, but somehow rebuilding the inner cities of America, creating low and affordable housing, clean drinking water, somehow we cannot afford to do that. I disagree. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the Latino community. Undocumented. Many of them are being exploited on the job because they have no legal rights. Many of them are living in fear and in the shadows. I believe that we must move toward comprehensive immigration reform and a path to citizenship. Whose voices are almost never heard, and that is the Native American community. The Native American people, from before we were a country, were lied to, were cheated, and treaties negotiated were broken. We owe the Native American people more than we can ever repay. Many of Native Americans on reservations today and Native American communities are really hurting with high rates of poverty, unemployment, youth suicide rates off the chart. I think that it is high time to change our relationship to the Native American people. I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment. And in that capacity, I have talked to scientists in our country and all over the world, and I want all of you to know the debate is over. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is already doing devastating harm. And what scientists are now telling us is that they have underestimated the severity of the problem. And in fact, if we do not get our act together in the very near future, what they have predicted is underestimating the potential consequences for this planet in terms of drought, floods, extreme weather disturbances, rising sea levels, acidification of the ocean, and international conflict as people fight for limited natural resources. In my view, we have a moral responsibility to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable for future generations. And it is time to tell the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. Transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, and doing that as boldly and rapidly as we can. Now, I have been criticized for saying this in the past, so therefore I will say it again. On this issue. I believe that health care is a right of all people. and you think outside of the box and outside of the status quo, please understand, this is not a radical idea.
No, it's not.
In fact, every major country on earth, the UK, France, Germany, Holland, Scandinavia, Canada, I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. All of the major countries on earth guarantee health care to all of their people as a right. We can and must do the same. Now, I am a member of the Senate Committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act has done some very important things. We have ended pre-existing conditions. We have expanded health care for 17 million Americans, and we have done away with discrimination in pricing for women. Today, despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, 29 million Americans have zero health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments. And every person in this room and in this country is being ripped off by the drug companies who are charging us. Crazy. I mean, just stuff that is just makes no sense at all. 1 out of 5 Americans today go to their doctors. They're sick, they go to the doctor, they get a prescription written. 1 out of 5 of those people can't afford to fill that prescription. All over this country, senior citizens are dividing their pills in half because they don't have the money to buy the medicine that they need. That's pretty crazy stuff. That is why at a time when, despite all of that, we are spending much, much more per capita on healthcare than we do in UK, than we do in France, than we do in Canada. We spend much more per person than those countries do. The time is now for us to move toward a Medicare for all system. Now, everybody in this room knows that real change never takes place from the top on down. It always takes place from the bottom on up. That is just the reality of American life and of world history. 100 plus years ago in Pennsylvania and in America, when workers were working 7 days a week, when children were working in factories, when workers had no rights, could be fired arbitrarily, workers said enough is enough. We're human beings. We want dignity on the job. We will form trade unions to represent our interests. Not an easy struggle, but their efforts helped create the American middle class, and we thank those who waged that fight. 100 years ago, in this country, and people forget this, women did not have the right to vote, did not have the right to get the education they wanted, did not have the right to do the work they wanted. Society defined them in a certain way, but the women of this country said, sorry, we do not accept that definition. Stood up, fought back, women went to jail, they went on hunger strikes, some of them died. But what they said is that in America, women will not be treated as second-class citizens. For hundreds of years, including of slavery, African Americans and their allies stood up, fought back. Many went to jail, some died, many were beaten. But they said that America will not be a nation of racism and segregation and bigotry. We will change. 10 years ago, if we were in this room and somebody jumped up and said, you know, Bernie, I think that gay marriage will be legal in 50 states in this country, the person next to her would have said, you're nuts. That can't happen. But what happened is because the gay community and their straight allies said that in America, people should have the right to love whomever they want. 5 years ago, no time at all. Somebody, if I were here and somebody jumps up and says, you know, Bernie, the $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage, it's a starvation wage. We've got to raise it to $15 an hour. The person next to her would have said $15 an hour. You're nuts. You're thinking too radically. You're thinking too big. Maybe $8, maybe even $10 an hour. You want more than double minimum wage. Can't happen. But you know what happened? Yeah. Workers in the fast food industry, in McDonald's, in Burger King, went out on strike. They stood up, they fought back, and then what happened? 3 years ago, Seattle, $15 an hour. New York State, $15 an hour. What's the point of all of this? The point of all of this is change only takes place when people look around them and they say the status quo is unacceptable. We can change it and we will change it. The struggle that we face is not just the objective problems that we see. It is that millions of people have been conditioned into believing that the status quo cannot be changed. And that is what the establishment wants you to believe. Oh, your job just went to China? That's the way it is. You can't change that. You're making $10 an hour? Well, consider yourself lucky because there are people making $9 an hour. We can't change that. You don't have any health insurance or you can't afford to go to the doctor? Hey, that's what goes on in America. We can't change that. You're a woman making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. We can't change that. We're the only country in the world. We're the only country in the world. Only major country that doesn't provide paid family and medical leave. Hey, you're thinking too big.
There's nothing wrong with thinking big.
That's right. Think big, to say, excuse me, why is it that people have to go deeply in debt because they wanted to get a decent education? Why is it that we are not acting aggressively enough to transform our energy system and protect future generations? Why do we tolerate a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality? Once we start asking those questions, the answers fall into place. But if we don't ask those questions, the answers never will occur. There is nothing that I have said to you this afternoon that is radical. There is nothing that I have said to you that does not exist in many other countries around the world, or in fact used to exist right here in the United States of America. What our job is, as a people, is to tell the establishment the big money interests, the wealthy campaign contributors to Congress. It is the status quo is not working for working Americans, and we demand change. Real change, not tinkering around the edges change. Next Tuesday, there will be a very important primary here. If there is a large voter turnout, I believe we will win. And your relatives, let's create the largest voter turnout in Pennsylvania history.